If you're over 60 and still struggling financially, listen carefully, because what I'm about to share might challenge everything you've believed about money, age, and purpose. Most people think that by 60, your financial story is already written, that if you haven't made it by now, it's too late. But what if I told you there's a verse hidden inside the Torah that completely destroys that idea? When most people think about aging, they imagine decline, less energy, fewer opportunities, and a slow fading of relevance. Society quietly reinforces this idea, especially when it comes to money. It tells you that if you haven't built wealth by a certain age, your chances are gone. But this way of thinking is completely opposite to what the Torah teaches. In its wisdom, age is not seen as a limitation. It is seen as a form of elevation, an increase in value, not a decrease. By the time you reach 60, you carry something that cannot be bought, rushed, or taught quickly: lived experience. You have seen cycles, success and failure, opportunity and loss, risk and reward. You have made decisions that worked and decisions that didn't. And while some people look back at those moments with regret, the deeper truth is that each one added a layer of understanding. That understanding is what transforms age into authority. Authority is powerful because it changes how you see the world and how the world can respond to you. A younger person may have energy, but often lacks clarity. They chase trends, jump from one idea to another, and repeat mistakes because they haven't yet learned the patterns of life. But someone over 60 has already seen those patterns. You begin to recognize what actually works and what is just noise. This clarity gives you an advantage that is often underestimated. The problem is not that people lose value as they age. The problem is that they stop recognizing their own value. When someone believes they are too old, they unconsciously withdraw. They stop taking initiative. They avoid opportunities. They play small, not because they have to, but because they think they should. And that belief becomes a self-fulfilling reality. But when you shift your perspective and start seeing your age as authority, everything begins to change. Instead of asking, "Am I too late?" you start asking, "What can I do now that I couldn't do before?" That question opens doors. It moves your focus from limitation to possibility. At this stage of life, you don't need to compete in the same way younger people do. You don't need to rely on speed or endless hustle. Your strength lies in precision. You can evaluate opportunities faster and more accurately, because you've seen similar situations before. You can avoid costly mistakes because you've already paid for those lessons. You can build trust more easily because your experience carries weight. This is where financial transformation becomes realistic again. Not through chasing quick wins or risky ventures, but through thoughtful, intentional decisions. When you operate from authority, you naturally become more selective. You invest your time, energy, and resources into things that align with your knowledge and strengths. And that alignment is what creates stability and growth. There is also a deeper shift that happens internally. When you respect your age, you begin to carry yourself differently. You stop apologizing for where you are in life. You stop comparing yourself to timelines that were never yours. Instead, you stand in your own story with confidence. That confidence influences your actions, your communication, and even the opportunities that come your way. The truth is, many people spend their younger years trying to prove themselves, often making rushed or emotional decisions, but after 60, you have the chance to operate from a completely different place, one of awareness, patience, and control. That combination is incredibly powerful when it comes to building wealth. So the real shift is not external, it's internal. It's the moment you stop seeing age as something that disqualifies you and start seeing it as something that qualifies you. Because once you do that, you stop holding yourself back. You start using everything you've learned. And when experience is finally used instead of ignored, it becomes one of the most valuable assets you have. When someone reaches the age of 60 and is still struggling financially, the immediate assumption is that money is the problem. Not enough income, not enough savings, not enough opportunities. But if you look deeper, you'll often find that the real issue isn't just what's in the bank account, it's what's happening in the mind. Because long before financial limitation shows up in reality, it quietly takes root as a belief. Over time, repeated disappointments can shape how a person sees themselves and what they think is possible. Missed chances, failed investments, unstable income, or simply years of hard work without the results you expected. These experiences don't just pass by, they leave impressions, and those impressions slowly turn into conclusions like, "I'm not good with money," or opportunities don't work out for me, or the most damaging one, it's too late now. The danger of these thoughts is not that they exist, it's that they feel true. Once a belief feels true, it begins to guide behavior. A person who believes it's too late will stop looking for opportunities, or if they see one, they'll hesitate, they'll doubt themselves, overthink, and often walk away before even trying. And from the outside, it may look like life simply isn't giving them a break, when in reality, they are no longer fully participating. This is why poverty at this stage of life is often less about external conditions and more about internal patterns. Two people can be in similar financial situations, but one begins to rebuild while the other remains stuck. The difference is rarely luck, it's mindset. One person still believes change is possible, while the other has quietly accepted that it isn't. What makes this especially challenging after 60 is that these beliefs have had decades to solidify. They are no longer just thoughts, they feel like facts. And when something feels like a fact, it becomes very difficult to question. But the truth is, beliefs are not permanent. They are learned, and anything learned can be unlearned or replaced. The first shift comes from awareness, recognizing that the story you've been telling yourself may not be serving you. Just because something hasn't worked in the past doesn't mean it can't work in a different way now. Circumstances change, knowledge grows, and most importantly, you are not the same person you were years ago. You have more insight, more patience, and a better understanding of what matters. Once you begin to question limiting beliefs, you create space for new ones. Instead of saying, "I've failed too many times," you can start asking, "What did those experiences teach me that I can use now?" Instead of thinking, "I missed my chance," you can shift to, "What opportunities fit who I am today?" These are not just positive phrases, they are practical ways of redirecting your focus. Mindset alone does not create wealth, but it determines whether you take the actions that lead to it. A person who believes change is possible will take small steps, learning something new, exploring an idea, making a connection, trying again, and those small steps compound over time. On the other hand, a person who believes nothing will change often remains in the same place, not because they lack ability, but because they have stopped moving. There is also a sense of identity tied to this. After years of struggle, some people begin to identify with their situation. Being broke or unlucky becomes part of how they describe themselves. And when something becomes part of your identity, you unconsciously protect it, even if it's harmful. Changing your financial situation then requires more than just new actions. It requires a shift in how you see yourself. You don't have to ignore your past, but you also don't have to be defined by it. Your past explains where you've been, not where you must stay. At any point, you can decide to think differently, act differently, and respond differently to opportunities. That decision may feel small, but it has a powerful effect over time. The moment you stop accepting limiting beliefs as truth is the moment you begin to regain control. You start to see possibilities where you once saw barriers. You begin to act with intention instead of hesitation. And slowly your external reality begins to reflect that internal change. So while money is important, it is not always the starting point. The real starting point is what you believe about yourself, your future, and what is still possible. Change that, and you change the direction of everything that follows. Most people carry their past like a weight, especially when it comes to money. They remember the business that failed, the investment that went wrong, the opportunity they didn't take, or the years they worked hard without seeing real progress. Over time, these memories turn into regret, and regret quietly turns into self-doubt. By the time someone reaches 60, they often look back and think, "I've made too many mistakes to recover." But that way of thinking misses something important. Those mistakes are not just losses, they are lessons. And at this stage of life, those lessons can become one of your greatest financial advantages. Every failure contains information. When something didn't work, it showed you what to avoid, what to question, and what to do differently next time. The problem is, when people focus only on the emotional side of failure, they ignore the practical value hidden inside it. They remember the disappointment, but they don't extract the insight. As a result, they feel stuck instead of strengthened. But imagine approaching your past from a different angle. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you start asking, "What did this teach me that I can use now?" That single shift changes everything. It turns your past from something that holds you back into something that guides you forward. By the time you are over 60, You have experienced more real-world situations than most people. You've seen how deals fall apart, how people behave under pressure, how markets shift, and how timing can make or break an opportunity. These are not things you can fully learn from books or theory. They come from experience, and experience is one of the most valuable assets in any financial journey. Younger individuals often make decisions based on excitement or fear. They chase trends, follow the crowd, or act too quickly without fully understanding the consequences. But someone who has already been through multiple cycles has a different perspective. You are less likely to be impressed by short-term hype and more likely to look for stability, sustainability, and long-term value. That ability alone can protect you from costly mistakes and position you for smarter opportunities. Your past also helps you recognize patterns. You begin to see similarities between situations that might look different on the surface. For example, a risky investment today might remind you of something you experienced years ago, allowing you to step back instead of rushing in. Or a new opportunity might align with a lesson you learned earlier, giving you the confidence to act when others hesitate. This pattern recognition is not luck. It is built from everything you've already lived through. There is also a level of emotional control that comes from experience. After facing setbacks, you learn not to panic as easily. You understand that not every loss is permanent, and not every gain is guaranteed. This balance helps you make decisions more calmly and rationally, which is essential when it comes to building wealth. Emotional decisions often lead to financial mistakes, while thoughtful decisions create stability over time. However, for all of this to work, you must be willing to change how you see your past. If you continue to label your experiences as failures, you will carry them as a burden. But if you begin to see them as training, you start to carry them as tools. The events don't change, but their meaning does, and that meaning shapes how you move forward. This is where many people miss their opportunity. They spend years wishing they could go back and do things differently, instead of using what they already know to make better decisions now. But the truth is, you don't need to go back. You already have what you need. You just have to apply it. At this stage of life, success is not about starting from zero. It's about starting from experience. You are not building blindly. You are building with awareness. You know what works for you and what doesn't. You understand your strengths and your limits. And when you use that knowledge intentionally, you can move forward with more clarity than ever before. Your past does not disqualify you from success. In many ways, it prepares you for it. The mistakes you made were not the end of your story. They were part of your development. And when you stop running from them and start learning from them, they become one of the strongest foundations you have. So instead of seeing your history as something that held you back, start seeing it as something that can push you forward. Because the lessons you've already paid for, through time, effort, and experience, can now become the very thing that helps you create a different and better financial future. Many people spend their lives believing that wealth comes from constant hustle, working longer hours, pushing harder, chasing more opportunities, and never slowing down. This idea is especially strong in younger years, where energy is high and the focus is on doing more to earn more. But as you move past 60, this approach often becomes exhausting and ineffective. Not because you've lost ability, but because the strategy itself is no longer aligned with who you are. At this stage, the path to financial growth shifts. It is no longer about how much you can do, but about how well what you do actually fits you. This is where alignment becomes powerful. Alignment means your beliefs, your identity, and your actions are working together instead of pulling you in different directions. When there is no alignment, people often feel stuck even if they are working hard. They might be putting in effort, but deep down they don't believe in what they're doing, or they don't see themselves as someone who can succeed. That inner conflict creates hesitation, inconsistency, and eventually burnout. For example, a person might try to start a new income stream, but inside they are still carrying doubt from past experiences. They question every decision, delay taking action, or give up too quickly. On the outside, it looks like lack of discipline, but in reality, it's misalignment. Their actions are trying to move forward, while their beliefs are holding them back. At this stage of life, alignment becomes more important than effort. You don't need to chase every opportunity, you need to choose the right ones. And the right ones are not just the most profitable on paper, but the ones that fit your experience, your knowledge, and your personality. When something aligns with who you are, it feels more natural. You don't have to force yourself to stay consistent, because the work itself makes sense to you. This is why many people over 60 find success when they simplify their approach. Instead of trying to do multiple things at once, they focus on one or two areas where they have real understanding. That focus allows them to go deeper, make better decisions, and build something stable over time. It removes the noise and confusion that often come from chasing too many directions. Alignment also affects how you see money itself. If you view money as something difficult, stressful, or out of reach, that belief will influence your behavior. You may avoid financial decisions, hesitate to invest, or feel uncomfortable when opportunities appear. But when your mindset shifts, and you begin to see money as something that flows from value and clarity, your actions start to change. You become more open, more confident, and more willing to engage. Another important part of alignment is identity. Many people carry an outdated image of themselves, someone who struggled, someone who failed, someone who never quite figured things out. If that identity remains unchanged, it becomes very hard to create a different future. Because even if new opportunities appear, you may not feel like the kind of person who can take advantage of them. But when you update your identity, when you start seeing yourself as someone who is experienced, capable, and still growing, your behavior naturally shifts. You begin to make decisions that match that identity. You take more responsibility, you act with more intention, and you stop holding yourself back based on who you used to be. At this point in life, success is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters. It's about removing what doesn't fit and strengthening what does. When your beliefs support your actions and your actions reflect who you truly are, progress becomes more consistent and less stressful. This doesn't mean you stop working or stop trying. It means your effort becomes more focused and more effective. Instead of spreading yourself thin, you channel your energy into things that have a higher chance of working because they align with your strengths. Wealth then becomes a result of clarity. You know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how it connects to your life. That clarity reduces mistakes, increases confidence, and creates a steady path forward. So the shift is simple but powerful. Move away from the idea that you have to work harder than everyone else, and move toward the idea that you need to work in a way that truly fits you. Because when everything inside you is aligned, even small actions can lead to meaningful results over time. One of the biggest reasons people remain stuck, even when they genuinely want change, is because they are still operating from an old version of themselves. Over time, every experience, successes, failures, struggles, shapes how you see who you are. By the time you reach 60, that identity can feel fixed, almost permanent. You may see yourself as someone who never figured out money, or someone who missed their chance, or simply someone who is no longer in a position to start again. And without realizing it, that identity begins to control your future. The challenge is that you cannot create a different life while holding on to the same self-image that produced your current situation. If you still think, act, and decide like the person you were years ago, you will continue to get similar results. Not because change is impossible, but because your internal blueprint hasn't changed. Your identity quietly influences your choices, what you believe you deserve, what risks you're willing to take, and what opportunities you allow yourself to pursue. This is why a new chapter requires a new identity. Not a fake or unrealistic one, but an updated version of who you truly are now. You are not the same person you were in your 30s or 40s. You have more awareness, more life experience, and a clearer understanding of what works and what doesn't. But if you keep defining yourself by your past, you deny yourself the ability to grow into that wiser version. Changing identity doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't come from simply saying positive words to yourself. It begins with a decision to stop labeling yourself based on past outcomes. Instead of saying, "I've always struggled financially," you begin to shift toward, "I am someone who is learning to manage and grow money more effectively." This may seem like a small change in language, but it has a powerful effect. It moves you from a fixed identity to a developing one. Once that shift begins, your actions start to follow. A person who sees themselves as capable will approach situations differently than someone who sees themselves as stuck. You might start paying more attention to how you handle money, making more thoughtful decisions, or exploring opportunities you would have ignored before. These actions don't need to be dramatic. They just need to be consistent. Over time, they reinforce your new identity. Another important part of this process is letting go of comparison. Many people over 60 feel discouraged because they compare themselves to others who seem more financially secure. They measure their progress against timelines that don't reflect their own journey. But comparison keeps you anchored in the past. It reminds you of what didn't happen instead of focusing on what still can. When you shift your identity, you stop competing with other people's timelines. You start focusing on your own path, your own pace, and your own strengths. This creates a sense of control that may have been missing before. You are no longer reacting to life, you are actively shaping it. There is also a level of responsibility that comes with a new identity. When you begin to see yourself differently, you can no longer rely on old excuses. You become more aware of your choices, and that awareness can feel uncomfortable at first. But it is also empowering, because it means you are no longer limited by habits or patterns that don't serve you. At this stage of life, transformation is less about starting over, and more about stepping into who you have become. You already have the knowledge, the experience, and the resilience. What you need is a mindset that supports those qualities instead of suppressing them. As your identity evolves, your confidence grows, not from external validation, but from your own actions. You begin to trust yourself more. And that trust is essential, because it allows you to move forward without constant doubt or hesitation. The process may be gradual, but it is real. Each decision you make from this new perspective strengthens it. Each small win reinforces it. And over time, the gap between who you were and who you are becoming starts to close. A different future is not created by waiting for circumstances to change. It is created by becoming someone who can produce different results. And that begins the moment you decide that your past does not define your potential.